This is not a joke, the moment the Oscars messed up the most coveted film award in the world.
The Academy Award for Best Picture.
You're impossible. Come on. La La Land.
As the stars and team behind the film took to the stage to make their winner's speech, the unthinkable happened.
There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
Moonlight won. Come on, this is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm afraid they read the wrong thing.
So no real winners, as Moonlight's glory was overshadowed by an Academy Awards which will be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Also ahead. Finally, they are being heard. The first alleged victims give evidence into the troubled child sex abuse inquiry more than 2 years after it was set up. A family shattered after their 5-year-old dies just hours after being turned away from the GP because of being late for the appointment. And the return of Snake, that is Nokia's big sell on its retro mobile, all that it seems.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. It was a twist even the filmmakers didn't expect, as the cast and team behind La La Land gave their acceptance speeches to tens of millions of film fans on live TV. A panic began behind them on the stage. The wrong winner had been announced, the wrong people were holding the Oscar. It fell to the film's executive producer to stop the celebrations and right the wrong, revealing Moonlight as this year's Best Picture. The mistake overshadowing Moonlight's big moment and spoiling what should have been a celebration of so many remarkable films this year. Our arts editor Nina Nanar reports on the mother of all mix-ups watched by the world.
And the Academy Award.
The look on presenter Warren Beatty's face should have told us something was not quite right.
For Best Picture.
You're impossible. Come on. La La Land. No surprise there. It was the night's front runner with 6 wins already. But the real blockbuster was yet to come.
And the Hollywood in the hearts and minds of people everywhere.
Midway through the acceptance speeches, people are scurrying across the stage.
And the humanity.
I'm sorry. No, there's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
Moonlight won. Come on, this is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm afraid they read the wrong thing.
This is not a joke. Moonlight has won Best Picture. Moonlight, Best Picture.
Chaos ensued in the auditorium and backstage.
It was really beautiful.
Wait, Moonlight's won Best Picture. Moonlight won Best Picture.
Whoa, we have a little...
Oh my goodness, Warren Beatty apparently read the wrong name. This is incredible.
The Moonlight cast hugged each other in disbelief at a blunder watched by thousands in the room and many millions at home.
Still a great night, though, Adnan. Still a great night.
No, this is shocking.
Even in my dreams, this could not be true. But to hell with dreams. I'm done with it, because this is true. Oh, my goodness.
Warren, what did you do?
It turned out the presenters had been given the wrong category envelope. The firm in charge of the Oscar votes, accountants PricewaterhouseCoopers, later apologising.
La La Land.
The folks from La La Land were so gracious. I can't imagine being in their position and having to do that. We spent a lot of time together over the last 6 months, and I can't imagine being in their position and having to do that.
Emma Stone from La La Land did win Best Actress on the night.
Thank you so much to the Academy.
Elsewhere, Casey Affleck won Best Actor for Manchester by the Sea. And a tearful Viola Davis won Best Supporting Actress for Fences.
Moonlight, Best Picture.
Though perhaps most tears on the night were shed by the Oscars organisers. After a show that had relatively few surprises, they'd saved the big one for the end. And unfortunately produced probably the most embarrassing Oscar moment in the show's history. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
So how did such a big mistake happen, and who is to blame? It turns out there are, as Nina was saying, 2 sets of envelopes containing the names of the winners that are held by a pair of accountants hired in for the ceremony. And as she mentioned, their employer, PwC, has apologised. But as Helena Carter explains, that hasn't stopped a huge inquest into what went wrong.
This is the pair at the forefront of the fiasco. Brian Cullinan and Martha Ruiz are accountants in charge of the ballot and the only people who know who the winners are on the night. They carry the results in black briefcases, keeping the results secret even from A-listers. Security around them is tight.
I will have an armed security guard with me all day of the day of the show. As we take separate routes to the show, we arrive together on the red carpet coming from different directions.
So just what went wrong? The first signs of confusion beginning to show as producer Mark Pratt was giving his acceptance speech.
Keep dreaming, because the dreams we dream today will provide the love, the compassion and the humanity that will narrate the stories of our lives tomorrow.
A stage manager runs across the stage as another speech gets underway, but now there's a scrum of people trying to sort out the mess. Warren Beatty is then given the correct envelope. At one point there appears to be 4 envelopes in total, and the speech is brought to a swift halt.
Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
A mistake that stunned Hollywood and left an embarrassed Brian Cullinan looking on in disbelief. What appears to have happened is the spare envelope for Emma Stone's Best Actress win was given to Warren Beatty instead of the correct envelope announcing Moonlight as Best Picture. A remarkable night for the audience and for viewers across the world, and one this pair would surely sooner forget. Helena Carter, ITV News.
We're joined by the entertainment journalist Emma Bullymore now. Thank you very much for coming to talk to me. Look, Moonlight shone over La La Land in the end. But nobody's talking about either of those films really today, which is a real shame, isn't it?
It is a shame. This is so mortifying for everyone involved, not least for Warren Beatty, who was at great pains to say, this is not my fault, I was given the wrong envelope. You could see he was confused about what was going on. However, the good news is that Moonlight has booked 80 more screens from Friday onwards. So this is the thing. Now that it's won this award in such spectacular style, I think people are going to be talking about it in the end, and people are going to see it, hopefully, which is the good news.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a strong year, though. The shortlist was remarkably strong, and what a shame that this has overshadowed that. We should be all going to see all of those films.
That's it, and you would have looked at it. If that hadn't happened, you would think it's a great night for La La Land still. They won Best Actress, Best Director, Best Song. Amazing things happened for them. But now it feels a bit tainted for them somehow, and it's all just a real shame.
There's been a backlash building against that film. Do you think that will fuel the backlash, or do you think because none of this was their fault, they might get a bit of slack now?
I think people just thought it was slightly overhyped, and I think that's because, you know, we live in dark days sometimes, and it's such a joyful film, so I think people thought it was getting a little bit too much credit. But this won't go against it. It's not anyone's fault. It's just a shame that Moonlight didn't really get their moment. They did get to go on stage, but in such a strange way, and they didn't get to do the proper acceptance speech. It was just such a shock that it happened. They let them go on for so long. You would think that as soon as the announcement had been made, someone in the gallery would know and come down and try and sort it out much quicker.
Just
to get through 3 acceptance speeches is quite incredible, I think.
Sheer panic, no doubt.
Yeah.
And somebody else that's not really being mentioned today, who provided a remarkable screen performance, is Casey Affleck, who did win, but nobody's talking about it.
He was fantastic, but his acceptance speech was very quiet, very reserved, so I think it just didn't make the headlines in the same way. Likewise, Justin Timberlake did an incredible performance at the beginning of the show. No one's talking about that. Jimmy Kimmel was brilliant, a very political speech, but also managed to keep with good humour.
Brilliant at not covering up the mistake, but dealing with the mistake.
And he said at the end, hey guys, it's just an awards show. And I suppose that's what we should all remember. There's a lot of important things happening in the world. It was a mistake. We need to move on.
And it sounds like it's still worth watching from start to end. So, Emma, thank you very much for that. Thank you. And for a full list of the real Oscar winners this year, head to our website, itv.com/news. Next, this lunchtime, 2.5 years after it was set up, the troubled independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England and Wales is today holding its first public hearings. It has begun examining the cases of British children sent to Australia in the years after the Second World War. The inquiry will eventually investigate claims against organisations and institutions across the UK. Geraint Vincent has the details.
There were thousands and thousands of them, British children sent to live in Australia, born into terrible poverty or the care system, The child migrant scheme was supposed to offer them a better life, education and opportunity. But for some, it became a living hell as they were exposed to physical and sexual abuse which was widespread and systematic. David Hill was one of those children. He's written a book which attempts to record the extent of the crime.
A lot of the physical punishments, including public thrashings, where the whole village had to witness the beating of kids who had done something wrong, were all in breach of the Child Welfare Act at the time. What the UK inquiry is going to discover is that it takes decades and decades for people to be able to confront and admit they were sexually abused.
David is one of a number of former child migrants who are giving evidence to the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which opened in London this morning.
The inquiry will hear of a crushing catalogue of sexual abuse, deprivation, violence and abusive institutional practices, and child has lived in hypervigilance and constant terror.
The first public hearings in this inquiry have been a long time coming, and they follow months of controversy about how the inquiry is being run. Professor Alexis Jay is in the chair now, but her appointment followed the stepping down of no fewer than 3 other chairwomen and the resignation of several senior lawyers. The inquiry is going to examine the extent to which young victims of abuse were failed by public and private institutions, from local authorities to the armed forces, charities and the church. It is an enormous task which has begun with the suffering of the child migrants. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
The government's coming under pressure to accept a ruling that would extend disability payments to people with mental health problems. Ministers want to block 2 court decisions which ruled up to 160,000 people should be entitled to the personal independence payments known as PIPs. But many MPs, including some Conservatives, are demanding a rethink. Our political correspondent Libby Vina is in Westminster this lunchtime. Libby, is the government likely to hold firm on this?
Well, at the moment it does look like the government is holding firm, and there's probably £3.6 billion worth of reasons for that. That's the estimate of how much it would cost to extend these disability payments to include new groups, which is what these 2 tribunals ruled. Now, it is highly embarrassing, nevertheless, for the government, because only last month the Prime Minister, Theresa May, was talking about the need to rectify what she called the burning injustice, whereby people with mental health problems were treated differently from people who had physical ill health or disabilities. Her policy board chief, George Freeman, also poured fat on the fire when he suggested that this ruling had to be overturned because it was extending payments to people who had conditions such as serious anxiety, and that wasn't the same as serious disabilities. Despite that, as I say, I think it's unlikely the government is going to back down. The former Work and Pensions Secretary said there were good reasons why these tribunal decisions should be overturned.
When you're running a benefit support system that pays large amounts of cash week in, week out to millions of people with disabilities, you do need some pretty clear regulations and rules. You do need to make some definitions about who will receive higher payments or less payments, and that's why ministers have got to make these difficult judgments, and they're right to do so.
Well, the government may be in no mood to back down, but the mechanism it's used to try and get these tribunal judgments overturned does mean that the House of Lords will have a say, and this could still be thrown out in the House of Lords.
Libby Vina, thank you. Still to come, a muddle amid the rubbish. Why Keep Britain Tidy believes we're getting confused when it comes to recycling. And the return of a classic that Nokia hopes will recharge their fortunes. Before that, the family of a 5-year-old girl who died of an asthma attack after being turned away by a GP for being late to an emergency appointment says their lives have been left shattered. Ellie Mae Clark and her mother were told to return the next morning, but the schoolgirl died just 5 hours later. They're speaking out now after it emerged the doctor received only a written warning. Nick Wallace reports.
On the 26th of January 2015, 5-year-old Ellie Mae was having trouble breathing. Her mum booked an emergency appointment at the local health clinic in Newport. Ellie Mae and her mum were turned away by their doctor, Joanne Rowe, because they'd checked into the clinic 8 minutes late. That night, Ellie May stopped breathing and died. The family are furious with the doctor they say is responsible for Ellie May's death.
I think it's disgusting. She shouldn't have been turned away, no matter child, adult, anyone. That's a job, a doctor, to care and look after people. So, I'm just disgusted with her.
Dr. Rowe had a reputation for being unapproachable and volatile. An investigation into her conduct on the day Ellie May died led to a formal warning from the General Medical Council, which states you did not consider the medical history of the child or provide advice on how the child's parents could access alternative medical care. The child died later that evening of asthma. Your failure to see and assess this child does not meet with the standards required of a doctor. The Clark family say they were kept in the dark about the investigation into their GP's conduct and think the warning amounts to nothing more than a rap on the knuckles.
Livid. It's like, how can another surgery want to take her on after what she's done? It's like, if she's not really a good doctor, then why would you have a doctor waiting for you? Because there's a chance you can do it to someone else, turn someone else away.
Dr. Rowe, who now practices in Cardiff, has so far refused to comment or apologise for her actions. A coroner's investigation into Ellie May's death is still ongoing. Nick Wallace, ITV News.
An elderly man has died in hospital after a tree fell onto his car he was travelling in during Storm Doris. Aged in his 80s, he was a front seat passenger when high winds caused the incident in Shropshire last Thursday. A court's heard how a man who murdered his ex-girlfriend and her new partner searched online for how to kill someone. Andrew Saunders has admitted killing Lee Simmons and Zoe Morgan last September outside the Cardiff Matalan store where they worked. And NHS England is investigating whether patients' lives were put at risk after more than 500,000 pieces of confidential patient correspondence were mislaid. The documents, ranging from blood test and cancer results, didn't reach their recipients because they were mistakenly stored in a warehouse. Next, are you confused by the recycling rules in your area? The campaign group Keep Britain Tidy says there are so many different systems in England, many of us are throwing things away when they could be reused. It has found at least 300 schemes in use across the country, and the average recycling rate in England is just 42%. They point to a more streamlined system in Wales, where the average recycling rate is much higher at 60%. Well, the Chief Executive of Keep Britain Tidy, Alison Ogden-Newton, is here with me now. You go to any friend's or relative's house in different parts of the country and they have different bins, different rules, different things about whether you wash things before you recycle them. It's so confusing, isn't it?
It is confusing, and we appreciate that if you want people to do the right thing, you have to make it pretty straightforward, and it's not.
Why is it so confusing? Is it individual councils who make these rules, and why is there nobody in overall control of this?
Recycling has developed in this country absolutely exclusively through the auspices of local authorities. So they've been left basically to generate their own systems. And we understand we're asking for quite a difficult thing, because it is down to each individual local authority. And there are local specificities, like, for instance, if, where there are lots of holiday cottages, you can't necessarily do the same sort of recycling levels you could in urban areas. But having said that, we feel that we absolutely need to be on a journey towards a single system, because otherwise the recycling rates that have plateaued at 44% aren't going to improve, because people are just so confused.
You can campaign for that. Who's going to make that call, make that decision to say, with small kind of different rules for places like Cornwall with lots of holiday cottages, this needs to be universal and uniform?
I think we can call for it to be universal, and I think we can understand that this is a journey that we're on. I think there are authorities like the LGA that work specifically with local authorities that have already started this conversation and are in fact with an organisation called RAP talking about options and trying to recognising the limitations.
So
of the current
London's
system.
doing okay. Why is Wales doing so well?
Well, they're doing incredibly well because they have cracked this nut. They have introduced a single system and they are bringing everyone in so that when you can talk to people about campaigns and additional things that they might be able to recycle or things that they can look at to recycle more, they know exactly what they're doing because it's the same system for
Evidence
everyone.
there, one system works. Alison, thank you very much for coming in to talk to me. Thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, if you pine for a time when all you could do on your phone is make a phone call, Nokia may have the answer. It's announced it is selling an updated version of one of its classic mobiles. It even has a version of Snake. Good news then for retro game fans, but is the relaunch for real or just a great marketing ploy to get the company back into the lucrative smartphone world we now live in? Here's Sally Biddulph.
Remember the ringtone? Well, now it's back. The new generation in the front row filming its launch on their smartphones. No, the irony is not lost. The Nokia 3310 was once the king of phones, and now 17 years on, it's being relaunched for those who want their phone to do less.
There are many cases where just being able to send and receive text messages, receive and make phone calls and play Snake is exactly the right package for them.
People are wedded to smartphones everywhere, always connected. This new old Nokia returns to a time when mobile phones were simpler. But will consumers really swap the mod cons for a stripped-down phone and go retro?
To swap it, no. But to get one with it, yeah, as like a second phone.
I use my phone for things that a Nokia wouldn't do, like I'll look for maps, I don't know, check the weather forecast.
I don't think I could go back to that days. I used to have one, but I feel like I've moved on.
Would you buy that mobile phone?
Yes, as a second phone.
But not as a first phone?
No.
So a nod to nostalgia, a new toy, or a definite no? Nokia are also launching 3 new smartphones to ensure every base is covered. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Our main story, the accountancy firm in charge of protecting the Oscar results has apologised for a mistake which led to La La Land rather than Moonlight being announced as Best Picture. Mary Nightingale will have the very latest reaction on that and more on the ITV Evening News at 6:30. From everyone here right now, bye-bye.